But for those people who were not offended by that and don't care, it's time to jump into the rotation.
Marijuana in my soul, marijuana in my heart.
Now, for anybody who was upset about that, I'm sorry. It's just that I just couldn't help myself. But I mean, being in prison is not a fun thing. But what's interesting about cannabis is
Have you
that,
been to prison?
yes,
You have?
I worked in Lorton Prison in D.C. area when I was working for the Centers for Disease Control.
Oh, you were one of the guards. Okay.
No. But I got a chance to meet James Colson and a bunch of some of the Waterhouse, those guys who were actually hanging out in Lorton Prison over in Occoquan. It's lovely territory. There's actually a huge apartment complex overlooking the prison over there called Prison View Estates. I don't know why anybody would buy anything there at a place called Prison View Estates, but there it is, right there in Occoquan.
Or let's put it this way, Gary. Anybody who did, you'd kind of wonder about them.
Well, they were just keeping an eye on their loved ones. You know, it's all the congressmen and Illinois governors and stuff that were there.
Mhm.
It was all kind of an interesting situation. Anyways, we are the Cannabis Triumphate. My name is Gary Stein. I'm the political director for Suncoast Normal, and also there. Oh, I should wait for the applause, shouldn't I? Sorry about that, artificial audience. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Our master of public health, and to my right, your left, is our deputy director, Carlos Angel Jose
Yeah.
Ermita,
Woo!
which is Cuban for what?
Huh?
I was just asking you to translate, but don't worry about it.
It's Cuban for courageous hermit.
Courageous hermit.
Yeah.
And our master of business administration. And above us on the right hand side, your left, I think, I don't know, is our executive director, Chris Cano, who's coming to us from above the Beltway, where he hits them below the Beltway and tries to keep an eye on what all those things going on in DC. So, Chris, what has been going on in Washington this week as people are starting to get back to work?
Well, Carlos, why don't you go ahead and roll that beautiful theme music?
Oh, it's time, huh? I didn't show you that.
Wow, I am so impressed with that.
I didn't show you that.
I need an atomizer after that one.
I put that on while I was talking to Mark. I put that together while I was talking to Mark before the show.
That's amazing. At least you didn't do the zombie thing crawling out. I saw on some of the templates there. So, Chris, what's going on in DC?
Well, there's some new studies coming out that raise concerns over the inhalation of THCO. A new study published in the Journal of Medical Toxicology is really raising safety concerns over THCO acetate. A lot of folks have been able to get this over the counter since the Farm Bill and a lot of hemp-derived products coming out.
Not even going to lie, I got some THCO in the back.
Yeah. And so, the study's authors caution that THCO shares similar structures with vitamin E acetate, which is an additive in vape cartridges that was previously linked to the outbreak of EVALI lung disease back in 2019. There were several thousand cases nationwide back then and more than 60 fatalities. Like many other novel synthetically derived cannabinoids, it's never really been tested for safety in human studies. And the reported effects are that 2 to 3 times more psychoactive activity in THCO than Delta 9 THC. And so, the Department of Forensic Science at Virginia Commonwealth University and the Director of Laboratory of Forensic Toxicology Research said that these products are unregulated, untested, but they're readily available on the internet and sometimes from sources. Now, Carlos, I know you, tend to look for making sure that your products are healthy and such. But there has been, with third-party testing, found to be impurities and contaminants in some Delta 8 and THCO products, including heavy metals like magnesium, chromium, nickel, and mercury. And so, making sure that you have a product that is properly labeled.
Well, not to mention, of course, not that I'm in a position to kiss the ass of the Department of Agriculture, but this is why
pay for that.
Florida actually is kind of a primo state for hemp, because we have the Department of Agriculture overlooking these things. The Department of Agriculture, yeah, they did this whole thing with the mushrooms with me, But the truth is that they informed me about this quite a long time ago. Like the truth is that if you're a good hemp retailer, maintaining your license with the Florida Department of Agriculture, you're in a good spot because they test their products. They've taken things off of my shelf because they've tested for heavy metals and things like that. So, Florida, you're in a good position. Just make sure if you're getting your hemp, make sure you're getting it from a reputable place that plays ball with the local government.
See, here's where I have an issue. It's something that I talked to the Department of Agriculture with a couple of years ago because they wanted to go after the retailers and say the retailers should not have anything unsafe on the shelves, which is true. But the thing is, the retailers don't have the wherewithal or the money to go ahead and third-party test every single product that comes in wholesale.
I tried once. It was hard.
Yeah, it's also expensive.
Yeah, very
And-
expensive.
And if you haven't made your money off the product yet, having to get it tested each time you got a new batch coming in, it severely curtails your profitability.
At least like 2 years ago, when I looked into it, it was like $80 to do cannabinoid tests, and it was like $300 to do.
And so I
solar
was telling them
panel,
what you need to
metals,
do is
all
if you
that.
have anything that comes up bad at the store, then start tracking it down to the manufacturer. Find out who white labeled, so or whatever else they have to do to find out where the manufacturer is and find them or curtail them, not the retailers, because the retailers are the people who keep this market free.
Well, one of the other issues is that some of the labs in Florida have been questionable in how they produce lab results. I mean, oftentimes labs are giving these MMTCs and other places the results that they want. And so really making sure that you have an independent third-party testing lab when you do test that's going to give you actual independent results and not what you're seeking. And so, what you don't want is labs in this state and in other states doing a lot of way posters are, where they give the clients the results they want rather than what the actual facts are, and that's a major concern.
Well, it's it is good to know that the Department of Agriculture is watching our shoulder and making certain the products we get are safe, or at least what they call GRAS, generally seen as safe, regarded as safe, or grass. I think it's a great name for
They
it.
also didn't have the
Rating.
resources really. Like they just tacked this on to like convenience store. Like Nikki Fried never had any budget given to her for to regulate the hemp industry in Florida.
Yep.
So it was
Well,
all tacked on to convenience stores and whatnot, and like the people that regulate 7-Eleven, right, then regulated Chillum.
Well, I had proposed to the Department of Agriculture a secret shopper program that paid for itself, and I actually got the labs to pitch in and offer their services as well, and they turned me down. But it's still out there, guys. You got a new sheriff in town over at the Department of Agriculture, but it can be done. And if you do the right algorithm and find the manufacturer, it's a lot better than shutting down 100 or 200 retailers who got the bad product.
Well, let's continue with the news here. On the bright side, marijuana legalization laws are not associated with increases in drug driving behavior, according to a recent published report by the Cannabis Public Policy Consulting Group coming out of Baltimore, Maryland. They looked at consumers from 25 states, and consistent with prior studies, it has been reported that where cannabis is illegal, they are more likely to report driving under the influence in states where the substance is legally regulated. So, that's one more notch in the hat for the argument to legalization, because also coming out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, a recent longitudinal data study published in the Psychological Medicine Journal, adult use legalization is associated with less alcohol abuse and actually no increase in psychosis. A team of researchers with the University of Minnesota and University of Colorado assessed the relationship between adult use cannabis legalization and psychosocial functioning in a cohort of 240 pairs of identical twins. One twin residing in a jurisdiction where adult use cannabis sales were legally permitted, while the other lived in a state where marijuana was criminally prohibited. And they found out that, there's less alcohol abuse. There's no increase in psychosis. So going back to the original argument that marijuana will make you get high and kill your family, like Victor Licata just doesn't find its stance in the modern era with all the research. So I say all that and share this news with you for one simple thing. tell Congress to prioritize cannabis policy reform in 2023. So, Carlos, if you can flash that link across the screen, I want folks to send an email to their congressman, demand that they actually do something. We have a split government right now with Democrats in charge of the Senate, Republicans in charge of the House. And so it is vital that, we get something done in the House, and it's vital that the Democrats in the Senate get something done. So with this mixed government, I'm hoping that we won't have to punt the football until after the 2024 election, but that this joint Congress can get something done now.
And may I recommend that you not only email them, but you also get pencil and paper or pen and printer or whatever, and actually send out a snail mail letter to your congressman as well, because those actually get read more so than the emails do, which get sent to a staffer for sorting and eventually deleting.
Give the snail mail.
So the last thing I wanted to report on, and this is kind of a great segue into introducing our guest today, pain patients have been found to be switching to medical marijuana instead of opioids, according to a recent study by the American Medical Association. And so, that I think is just an amazing progress moving forward in this country. People are getting off of opioids and they're using cannabis. And so, one of the great things about that, especially if you're older and you've been subscribed to opioids. I mean, one of the things I saw yesterday, it broke my heart when I was walking down the street in DC, that the age group for the highest increase of overdoses is between 55 and 69. So, it's seniors that are ODing right now on opioids in this country. And so education is so vital, especially when you think about all the misinformation that has been produced since the 60s around cannabis for propaganda purposes to promote the war on drugs. And so when it comes to cannabis education, I want to bring on our guest here, who's actually won an award for cannabis education in 2022 as one of the best online platforms, Marc Matoza. Marc, welcome to the rotation.
Well, thank you very much, Chris and Carlos and Gary. I appreciate coming on. And you're right, cannabis education is really important. It's something that it's one of the reasons I got involved in it was because I just felt we'd been lied to for so long, and it was something that could help literally millions of people. I mean, no one's ever died from cannabis, whether it's your adult recreation use or medical, and yet we push a product like opioids, which has a huge track record for causing deaths.
Keno, I met you at that spot in medical marijuana in Tampa in Temple Terrace, which just so happened to be right next to a pill mill. Mm-hmm. And one thing I remember is sitting outside of that location and hearing the people coming out of the pill mills, right, saying that they don't want to come there every day, that they're happy to see that medical marijuana is coming to Florida. Do we have any statistics on maybe has Florida's system been successful in putting down opioid use in Florida? It's still an epidemic here, right?
I mean, always we have a fentanyl problem right now, in Florida and across the country. Even some people getting fentanyl sprinkled into their cannabis. Right. So it's always important that if you go to the legacy market, that you have a reputable dealer.
I think sprinkled is a little more too generous. The fact is, if you have people who are actually packaging that stuff in the same room as rolling pre-rolls or packing up bud, the dust that flies into the air and falls down is just that so potent because of fentanyl that it becomes an issue. So it's not a matter of them actually, grabbing the bud and just doing this bit on all of them. That's not how it's happening. How it's happening is carelessness and an unregulated environment. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a fan of regulation, but still, you got to take care of the people's health.
I mean, Marlon just gave a comment about a person who's died. I know that in my line, which I've been doing this education for over 6 years now, almost 7 years, and I've had a number of people who've made that similar comment. I've had friends, relatives that have passed away, if not become disabled, and it's something that you look at that. And you just think, when you get something like cannabis where you're not going to die. I mean, that's what's amazing. I'm doing a seminar, for example, in the Villages on the 25th of January. And the first thing I bring up is you're not going to die. And I think that's important for everybody to understand, because especially not just seniors, but everyone, we're worried about fentanyl. We're worried about opioids. And here's what I find ironic. We supposedly have a federal government that's supposed to worry about that for us. Where the hell are they? I mean, FDA is not doing its job. I mean, to be blunt, to be candid with you. And, I hear all this stuff about, let's go study cancer. Well, we know that cannabis is effective against cancer. Why aren't we studying it here in the United States? Why is it being studied in Canada? Why is it being studied in Spain? Why is it being studied in Israel? And we can't study it here. It's because we have archaic laws in place because, candidly, this is how politicians get funded through the pharma and the alcohol companies.
Yep.
And now cannabis has been used as a euphoric, in part for medicinal use, for going on 2,000 years. And alcohol also seemed to have had a parallel course, both as a medicinal and for recreational use, even way back as far as we can remember. We're starting to find some some samples of mead coming out of ancient Europe right now, which are like 2,000 years old.
Right.
But the fact is, you still don't see the kind of information that has to be packed with all alcohol. I mean, with the cannabis, they have labels that are far bigger than the actual product container itself. So they have to have huge flyers stuck in every single bag that people buy, by state law, even by federal law. And yet you never have anything like that for alcohol. And yet people need to understand the issues and the problems and the side effects of alcohol that they don't even realize.
Sure.
But that's the nature of the regulated business. And that is why it's so important for everybody to be educated. I mean, I don't know of any other product out there that has to have more public education because people think they know what they don't know.
Well, I find it amazing when I first got involved in this business, and I still have friends who will say, "Why do I worry about medical cannabis? I'm just going to light a joint and it's going to fix the problem." And then you talk to them a couple months later, and they say, "Well, I tried cannabis and it didn't work." Well, guess what? Do you know what your terpene profile is? And by the way, smoking that joint, the minute you put that flame up to that joint, you're burning off all the terpenes, all the flavonoids, and 50% of the cannabinoids. And yet, that's the bad news. Here's what the good news is: it works. I mean, we're talking about something that's between 40 to 50% as effective as it should be, and it still works. And imagine if you can get something like a concentrate or a tincture or something like that, an edible that gave you all the terpenes and the flavonoids. That would be something that I think would make a big difference.
Now, we don't get a lot of good information from a lot of our bud tenders. A lot of them kind of look at us and say, "Hey, this strain will get you buzzed."
Right.
Say, yeah, but does it handle my migraines? Does it handle my back pain? Does it handle my kid's Crohn's disease? I don't know, but this will really get you buzzed.
You brought up an interesting point, because that's a project that I have. I'm going to be introducing in March to be able to solve that problem, not just for the bud tenders, but also for the general public. But the interesting part is, I mean, in defense of a dispensary, you're going to hire somebody. You're looking for somebody with cannabis experience. How many people have cannabis experience, right? So you hire somebody who's been using it recreationally for a long time, and their mantra, and God bless them, is how do I get the most THC for the least amount of money? That's my mantra, right? And so if you've been doing that for 10 years, 20 years, it's hard to break out of it. And a lot of them, which I found fascinating, is although the dispensaries do a very good job of trying to train people on flavonoids and terpenes and that type of thing, that's a lot of information to remember. Which terpene works for what product and what terpene is in what product. Boy, I don't know of anybody who really, in a dispensary, even at the production level, can answer that question. And put it that way. That's a key question to have to get the right product.
Yeah, and one thought that I had, of course, is that if you had, say, for instance, a telehealth type of booth in the MMTCs where they can actually talk to a cannabis doctor or a cannabis pharmacist who has more knowledge than the bud tender does, could talk to somebody on an individual basis. But of course, one thing is that our laws here in the state of Florida says that the cannabis doctors can't have any stake or pay from an MMTC.
Right.
And so therein lies a glitch, among also the fact I don't think that a lot of the MMTCs want to spend the money on that.
Well, Chris, I'd love to come back in March and explain to you what we're going to do, because we're going to solve that problem. To be flatly, we've been working on this for 2.5 years. Why wouldn't I bring it up now? Because candidly, I'm getting a patent. And when I get the patent pending, then I'll be able to explain it, and my lawyers will shoot me if I say anything. We're going to solve that problem.
And you've had more than one process patent out there, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got a few. Yeah, right.
You have a lot of different classes in regards to health, and do you see any particular classes that draw more people that people are more curious about than other topics?
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting. The ones that really get a lot
That
of
is
a
an
lot of
impressive
attention
schedule.
are the ones that are logical. If you take a look at the top 5 reasons that people go to a doctor, you have pain management. That's a big one. Anxiety and stress, especially after COVID, has become a very, very big one. Put that schedule back up, and I'll show you something that's coming into play. Those typically have been our biggest, in the past, have been our biggest seminars, but we actually started doing one on sleep, which we're going to do on March 8th. And that actually has been getting a lot of attention. In fact, it's almost getting to be almost as big as our pain management seminar.
Look at the variety though. Like I was surprised to find out earlier that you guys have a ketamine class, you guys have a B12 class. Everything sleep is very important. We see a lot of people come into the store here for sleep. So like, yeah, these are all really great classes.
A lot of folks, where we pick the classes from is a lot of folks will get a hold of us and say, can you talk about A, B, and C? If you notice on this session, go back for real quick. We're doing one on cancer, and we're going to be doing that on February 15th. Dr. Terrell Newton is going to join me for that. And then on February 22nd, we're doing one on neuropathy. And again, that's because we've been requested to do this by the audience. What I find amazing about my seminar series is each week is a different lifestyle altering condition. And so, usually when you have a program like a podcast, like The Rotation, you have folks that come on each week and see what you got to say. Well, I have such a varied background. I almost get a new audience every week. Only about 20% of our audience is week to week. Most of it is just people who have that particular condition that have been searching for a solution. And I find that very interesting. I'm going to be talking about terpenes. And the reason for terpenes and dosing at the end of the quarter is because those two things are the key to making sure medical marijuana is successful. And not a lot of people understand it.
Yeah.
And of course, Terrell Newton, Dr. Terrell, what do you want to call him? He's a wonderful lecturer. I mean, he is totally nerded out on cannabis, so to speak. I think he's like almost the Dustin Sulak of Florida.
Yeah, he's one of the few people I can get down and dirty with respect to talking about how it affects the body and the receptors and things like that. Which is really understanding how it helps cannabis. Let's put it that way. And in this project I'm working on, he's part of it. He's helping me with that.
I don't know if you've got any advice. This might be a strange question, but like I'm not sure if you know, Mark, but my mom actually just beat lymphoma, and she was taking cannabis to help. She was taking a 1-to-1 ratio, like 10 milligrams of THC, 10 milligrams of CBD, just to fall asleep at night, right? Just to help with nausea, right? But she could have been utilizing cannabis a lot more, in my opinion. And like, what is the best way to get somebody to take your class? Like, what is the best way to tell somebody, hey, you need this information? Like,
well, I think there's two things. First of all, you can lead a horse to water, but the question is, are they going to drink? That kind of thing. And I say that because, first of all, just let them know that the course exists. That's important. Getting the message out that these courses exist and getting it out. Like, I appreciate Suncoast Normal. We work together to be able to get it out to your audience. We work to get it out to a number of audiences. First, we got to let people know that it exists. And I think that's the first part. I think the second part is, are they comfortable paying attention to this and listening? Or will they even tune in? Because a lot of people are self-conscious. We're dealing with over 60 years of misinformation by the part of the government, the reefer madness. And whether we like to believe it or not, that is still very predominant, in our communities. I mean, I live in an area that has a lot of seniors. And when I first moved here 6 years ago, and people asked me what I do, and I told them, you'd have thought Darth Vader moved into the neighborhood. It was really amazing. Now, I live in Claremont. We ended up doing 7 seminars on medical cannabis. Right now, 288 people in my community have medical marijuana cards from MMTC that I know of. And now I can't walk into the clubhouse without getting bugged. Now all of a sudden Luke Skywalker walks in. That's kind of a whole different mentality. But that just had to do with education. It had to be with people talking and getting open enough. But that took 6 years, 7 years. What I'm trying to point out.
And yet every time I'm certain you get newbies that come in each day that ask the same questions you heard 6 years ago.
Oh yeah. I mean, you get people that I'll meet people and my wife tries to not tell people what I do because of the reactions that we get. It solicits discussions, pro and con. But you're right. There are people that still fall into that. Like I say, it's the education. They listen to our misinformation, and it
Yeah.
seems like people really these days tend to want to follow in misinformation more than they've ever seen before.
It's
I mean, when I
so
was growing up,
it's so
people really
interesting with my
questioned.
mother though, because like she would only take a small amount. She's going through chemo.
So she didn't go
She
Rick Simpson
she
protocol.
didn't go Rick Simpson. She
Didn't do
went 10
RSO. Yes,
milligrams. She
recommended
did 10
RSO.
milligrams THC, 10 milligrams CBD, and a gummy. Right.
See,
And she would half it. She would actually half it. She would do 5 milligrams.
Right.
And like she would say, she would tell me like if I do more than half, if I need the room starts spinning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like she was, and honestly, a lot of it, I think it was that she was scared to take that amount of THC. Like I think a lot of it was like predisposed stigmas about THC and getting high.
Well, that's
But
part of it, Carlos. Is like
and-
she's saying the room starting spinning. That's the medicine telling you sit your ass down so you can heal.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
so often we live in this society where we're on the move and we look at sickness as weakness. I mean, it's you can't even call in sick at most jobs in this country without getting hassled by your boss. So
Right.
that we have to really take the time for health and wellness and understand that healing the body requires sleep, requires us to chill out, and that's something that a lot of people aren't comfortable with because my aunt, when she was going through liver failure, she was like, I'm losing, I take the RSO and I'm out for the whole day, 16 hours. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. You need to sit your ass down and be healthy. And it's tough for a lot of people to realize that's how the medicine works.
It's fascinating. When I grew up, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I grew up with my father was a U.S. Marine. He fought in the South Pacific for 4 years. And so, we were my dad was a blue collar worker, and cannabis was, it's an illegal drug. And when I got involved in the business again, my family thought, again, Darth Vader had now come into the family. But when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, like 5.5 years ago, I get this phone call, and of course they wanted to she had breast cancer. She was 88 years old, and they wanted to do mastectomy and chemo and radiation. And I said, Mom, if they don't kill you, the surgery might. So what I did was I put her on RSO, but RSO regime. What's fascinating though is I explained to her, when you take this, you're going to get high, just like when you have your brandy in the evenings. Take it before you go to bed. Take it while you're being chilled out. But I set the expectation, is what I'm trying to point out, and she knew what was coming. And I explained it exactly the way you brought up, Gary. This is the medicine working. And what was interesting is we put her on a very heavy regime because she was given a short amount of time to live. She was given 2 months to live. This was 5.5 years ago or 5 years ago. She's still alive. She just had her 94th birthday.
Nice.
And I jokingly say you should have been dead 5 years ago. I mean, literally, that's what they told her. And I've had patients that I've run into with cancer and other things, especially cancer, where they've said, I remember me. I'm the guy who died 2 years ago. We're supposed to be dead 2 years ago, and did not go through the hassle of the chemos and the radiation. And if they did, they used it to be able to get their lives back. It's fascinating. Yeah,
it's amazing how much quality of a life can actually extend life.
In this business, if I had to say, what was the one thing that a lot of folks, I mean, I'm a senior citizen, and a lot of people ask me, why don't you just retire and go? I'm a golfer. And the answer is, on a daily basis, I have people literally on a daily basis will get a hold of me and say, thank you very much for that webinar or seminar. I got my life back. And without soliciting, which I found amazing. About 3 years ago, I had a lady who came up to me here in Claremont while I was getting ready for the seminar. We were doing live seminars, maybe it's 4 years ago. And she walked up to the podium and said, Mark, I'd like to thank you for what you do. And first of all, she asked me, do I remember her? And I said, ma'am, unfortunately, I don't. I talked to a lot of people. And she said, I was the lady that was in the wheelchair in the first row when you gave this seminar 9 months ago. And I thought, well, I remember her because her son was very big and wheeled her in, and we put her right up in front. And I helped her get a medical marijuana card that day, and we got her in some cannabis. And she came dressed to the nines. She said, it took me about 2 months to be able to get out of the wheelchair. Then I was on a walker. And she said, about a month ago, I was able to actually intermittently use the walker. And she said, my goal was to walk into this room and say thank you to you. And she did. And I had her speak for a few minutes. And he said, the only regret I had is it took me 78 years to figure out what the right medication was.
Mm.
And I got my life back. So I created a site. I think, Chris, you've seen it. It's called IGMLB. I got my life back, where we want to be able to take these stories and categorize them, from people and really categorize what's going on. Tell us your medical marijuana story. And because the reason that we want to do that is we can stand up and we can say, here's what it does. We can explain in detail the medical benefits of it, why it works, all that good stuff. But if they hear word of mouth from other people about people who have similar lifestyle conditions and they get that feedback, pro and con, okay, I think that's very, very important. We need a forum where the public can be able to give us their story about medical cannabis. And that's what we've done. We launched the site about a month ago, and we really haven't done a formal launch. We've done a kind of a soft launch. So if anybody wants to go to igmlb.com, I got my life back, we would be more than happy. Tell us your story. Again, pro or con. We're trying to get the message out about medical cannabis.
Yep. And you can go on to suncoastnormal.org, our homepage, and scroll down, and you'll see the I Got My Life Back link, and you can click it there, and you can share your cannabis testimonial there with Mark and the folks at IGotMyLifeBack.com.
And the reason I built that site was because I just heard this over and over and over again without soliciting, without saying anything to anybody. I mean, it's my mother thanks me every day for not having her go through the operation and not going through chemo and radiation. And I just find it very, very interesting that she's there. You watch how it helps people. And that's why I have such difficulty with our politicians who supposedly are here for our common good, not listening to the people. And more importantly, I love this. I love the bid. We need more research, and yet they put the cap on research for a long time. And then we look at our National Institute of Health database: 78,000 medical marijuana cases in the National Institute of Health as of yesterday. 78,000. That's more studies than Adderall.
Wow.
Than Tylenol, okay, than ibuprofen, okay. I mean, the only thing that's probably had more studies has been epilepsy, to give you an idea.
I mean, would it be safe to say that our politicians are ignorant?
I don't think they're ignorant. I'll tell you what, Carlos, I think they're very smart. They're purposely ignoring this. I mean, they're doing this on purpose. This isn't something where I'm not going to let them off the hook. They know exactly what they're doing, and because the people that come in and say, look, what happened in Colorado? Colorado makes cannabis legal, right? What happens to alcohol sales? I heard, I'm not sure. I've never been able to back it up, but I've had friends of mine who told me that alcohol sales went down 50% in Colorado.
That is correct.
I mean, even if it went down 20%, the alcohol companies are going to just have a bird. I did meet somebody from one of the big pharma companies. He was actually the worldwide sales and marketing manager, and I had a dinner with him one night. We were talking about cannabis and pharma drugs, and he admittedly the company was $100 billion company. I won't tell you which one it is, and he had a quota, and he said we ended up only coming in at 78 billion as opposed to 100 billion, and the difference was cannabis, which is interesting. And his quota is still the same, and he said, "There's no way in hell I'm going to make it up because cannabis is becoming so legalized so much that we are not going to be able to compete." And so what would they do? Would they take $1 billion and put it into lobbying money to stop it? You bet your tail feather they would.
Well, that's why the MMTCs hire folks like the guy who was in charge of Patron over on the West Coast, because alcohol sales they somewhat mirror, but the fact is, again, we don't have to put through as much information on alcohol as we do on cannabis, and yet. So somebody has to fill that gap. It's like terms. I spent a good portion of the pandemic sitting at home reading all those terms of use agreements I've been checking off all these years just to see how I could possibly do it. But nobody ever really reads those terms of service, the TOS agreements on software. You just check it off, keep on going.
Yeah, you keep right on going because you want to get down to look. Everything's and in defense of us, the human nature. This is just human nature. It's not a negative or positive. This is the way we work. We're all in what's in it for us. We have the self-protecting mechanism that has what's in it for us. So the first thing they teach you when you market or you present a product is make sure you understand the features, advantages, and benefits of what you're doing to the particular audience that you're addressing. I just think that again, these politicians are looking at what's good for them, and not necessarily what's good, even though they've taken an oath to be able to do that. And that's what I find really, really amazing. I mean, how can you have somebody? I mean, I'm not going to get political with the January 6th committee, but that's very black and white as to what's going on there. I don't think there's very many shades of gray. You're either pro it or against it. I mean, it's interesting. And I take that back into the cannabis world. Why aren't we? When I hear, and I'm going to criticize Joe Biden, I'm going to create a group. We're going to go after cancer. I have my child died from cancer. We want to study it. And yet Dr. Christina Sanchez for 26 years has been studying cannabis and cancer in Spain on a grant from the Spanish government. And we're not tapping into her knowledge base to be able to do that. And yet she has studies that are in the National Institute of Health database, our own database. If our politicians would look at the database that our doctors are pulling from, because as a cannabis practitioner, I use that database to get my information. Why, if we have it there, why aren't they using it? Let's put it that way.
Mark, case in point, here in America, Dr. Sue Sicily, who was doing research on how cannabis can help our veterans and how, the struggles that she went through with her tenure being affected at the university and them shutting down her research and then having to jump through hoops to get grants to start the research back up again. And to your point, Normal has identified more than 4,300 studies just in 2022 on marijuana and its different components. That's an annual record. So to have a politician or any public figure say we need more research is just kicking the can down the road as an excuse. Right. If you want more research, let's do the research to get cannabis FDA approved. The issue with FDA approval, and this is something that goes all the way back to when I was in my master's program in college, my professor told me, son, if you want to make money with a master's in public administration, go work for the FDA. And I'm like, why? He says, because the same companies that you're regulating are going to pay you millions of dollars to write white papers in their favor and use you as a subject matter expert. So, and so that corrupt process in our FDA with the influence that big pharma has on our bureaucracy and our safeguards is the reason why cannabis continues to get punted down the road. Because the fact is that if the FDA did study cannabis effectively, everybody could realize that you have a cure for cancer that you can grow in your backyard, and you don't have to spend millions of dollars to the pharmaceutical industrial complex to try and save your life or live a healthy life. That's the reason why many holistic practitioners are gone after by the federal government or state governments. One in particular is Dr. Sebi, who's very popular, among folks on the internet for his research on an alkaloid diet, healing inflammation and being able to cure cancer and those other things. And it's just sad to say that we live in a society where the bureaucracies in our government are actually killing more people than it is saving people.
And Chris, I think on one side, the government wonders why people stand up against them because, they feel lied to and all the rest of it. And the answer is, yeah, you have. I mean, look, I'm not a radical. I don't live in the backwoods. I don't carry a gun, but I do believe I'm mad at the government for lying to me. I mean, look, when you say research, as I recall, there was a guy who worked for Nixon named Schaefer. And as I recall, he did a study that has 1,184 pages that was commissioned by Nixon at that time to condemn cannabis. And that study was 180 degrees opposite of that. What did they do? Did they listen? No. Okay. Did they publish it? It wasn't published, I think, until the Obama administration came into play. They tried to squell it. So the research has been done by our government agencies to the point where they even went and got a patent on it, on cannabis. So I understand the argument, but the question is, it goes back to my lead a horse to water. Can you make them drink? Okay. Because they don't want to listen to the data. And for whatever reason right now, our politicians aren't listening to data and information. They're sticking with the hearsay stuff. And I think that's our danger, not just in cannabis, but I think in danger in general. We need to get back to people. And I don't care if they're Republican, Democrat, independent, green with pink stripes, whatever your position is, at least follow the facts and at least follow your moral compass. And that's what the important part is that we have here. How can you morally say that we're gonna do cancer research and not look into cannabis when Christina Sanchez has put out videos showing how it puts cancer into remission? Okay, I don't know. And the other thing I love is we've got to do this study. We've got to study it for 3-5 years. We got to take a test case. How many people do they study? 200, 300? I mean, if they did 1,000, you're blowing it out the door. Yet if you take a look at cannabis and you take a look at, it's been around, Gary, you mentioned like 2,000 years. Well, I think they found actually documents from China that's 5,000 years old. They've been using it as medicine. It's been documented for 2,000 years. That's when we find the actual pieces of paper. But they find little pots and things with the Egyptians that have cannabis in it. What's interesting is you look at the track record of cannabis, even here in the United States, from the 1948 to when they made it illegal in 1937, of how many people were helped using cannabis for a variety of things. Doctors would prescribe it on a daily basis. They didn't go out and do studies. They just knew it worked. And then all of a sudden, we got to prove it works. I mean, I have my old Italian relatives used to say, "What are these people crazy?" I mean, taking away hanging hams inside of stores because they can't figure out why it cures. Why would you do that? I don't see any Italians dying from that. No offense. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, Pliny the Elder, who was a Roman historian, often talked about them packing wounds with cannabis leaves.
Yeah.
And it was for the anti-inflammatory response, and they didn't know what anti-inflammatory was at the time. And
the Indians introduced that into the soldiers in the Civil War, by the way.
Well, let me comment on this for a second. The reason that it is the way it is, our medical system, Mark, you just touched on it. Back in the early 20th century, like right around the turn of the century, the Carnegie, who owned a big stake in much of the pharmaceutical companies, basically did a study, and they looked at MDs, they looked at DOs, they looked at every doctor's possible in this country, all the different medical practitioners, and when they found they basically prioritized a group that they found was most likely to prescribe prescription pills versus cannabis and other holistic medications, and that is why the MD designation in this country, that was the group that they were finding, and so Carnegie really pushed to where MDs had this strict pharmaceutical regimen that they would recommend, and Carnegie and Rockefeller really built the educational system in this country to make sure that they were putting out workers that were going to put profits back into their pockets, and so that's why our medical system in this country
rigged.
Yeah, it got away from. We have a rigged system,
to be blunt.
Yeah. And that's why our teachers, our medical schools this day, only a handful even teach about the endocannabinoid system.
Right.
We really have been living in a dark ages when it comes to utilizing cannabis and cannabis research. Thank God for Dr. Raphael Mechoulam and Hebrew University for really spearheading the last 60 years of research. I mean, this guy's in his 90s. It's time for him to enjoy his retirement rather than continue to have to do this research that our government seems to be failing to do.
But there's also research and there's research. I mean, you've heard the expression "garbage in, garbage out." There are a lot of folks who know how to cherry pick data in order to achieve the solution that they want, as opposed to the actual one. And unfortunately, that stuff often gets played. It gets airplay. And just to show you how badly we are off, actually, is that I believe that Alex Berenson was hired by Twitter this last week to be in charge of verifying information. And Alex Berenson, for those of you who don't know, wrote this wonderful treatise that was totally false called Tell Your Children, which was the original name of the Reefer Madness movie, by the way. I don't even know why he even chose that. But it talked about how cannabis it creates psychosis and things of that sort. And then, of course, he moved on to COVID research and COVID vaccines, where he was dubbed Time's most wrong man in 2021. And yet he is in charge of social media verification, which is really scary.
And when you go through a history of cannabis and you look at Queen Victoria using it, I mean, Queen of England, right? I mean, you go back and you look at what's been used in the fields in times of battle. You look at what the Indians have done with it. You go back to what's been going on in Asia. Do you need more research? I mean, do I really need more research to tell me that washing a wound is going to be good for me? I mean, come on. At some point in time, we know it works.
Biting my tongue, but like I gotta be honest with you. Like, sitting here with all the information you guys just presented, right? These politicians are being ignorant as fuck. All right, like, with all this information that they have available to them, that's been presented to them, like,
you're letting them off the hook by saying they're being ignorant. I'm actually not letting them off the hook. What I'm saying is they know what they're doing, and I'm holding them accountable. You took that oath to help our people, to help the people of your constituents that you have out there. I'm going to hold you to that. Okay, and I do think that when you've been presented the information and the data, and you still don't want to recognize it. By the way, it doesn't make any difference if it's in cannabis or anything else, that I'm going to hold them accountable for that.
I
don't
see
care
what
what
you're
party-
saying. I see what you're saying, Mark. You don't want to like throw them into a pile with all ignorant people because like some ignorant people are better than politicians.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Charlie, you hit the nail on the head. I'm not letting them off the hook. Let me put it to you that way. They work for me. I don't work for them. I don't think a lot of politicians understand that they work for me. Now, being able to go in and gerrymander a district to be able to keep you elected, like a lot of the goofball Republicans that are out there, and I'm a Republican, so I can say that. My party is made up of nothing but a clown show right now. And that's because we've gerrymandered these clowns in there who are making us look bad. We are not representing the people. I mean, where did the people like the Eisenhowers and the Rockefellers and those kind of guys, where's that moral compass that didn't exist before?
One thing that we often say when we're trying to push bills is we need to go out there and educate the legislate. And this does not mean that we have to pick a particular party. We need to
Oh,
talk
yeah.
to every single politician, regardless of party, to educate them because there's just as many ignorant Democrats as there are ignorant Republicans, ignorant libertarians. Sorry to say that actually does happen, and other independents, even members of the Green Party.
Yeah, this particular issue is, and that's why I got involved in cannabis education. It became obvious to me about 8 years ago. The medical cannabis program gets created here in Florida, and everybody looked around at me and says, "What is medical cannabis? Where do you go online? Where's the definition of medical cannabis? How do I use it? You know, where do I get my products? What's it made up of? Is it going to kill me?" All that information wasn't out there. And that's all I did. I mean, literally for almost 3 years until COVID hit, we put on almost 200 seminars throughout here in Florida, and we just talked about what is medical cannabis. And then when the COVID hit, we obviously couldn't do seminars in live anymore. So I got a lot of people came to me and said, "Are you going to continue?" And that's why I thought, well, why don't we just talk about lifestyle altering conditions? Why don't we talk about arthritis? Why don't we talk about cancer, neuropathy? And why don't we explain to people, here's what it is, here's what can be done, here's why it works, okay, and here's where you go get it, type of thing. So it's,
Well, the one thing we tell folks who use alcohol is don't drink and drive, or they say sometimes during the holiday season, remember to drink responsibly, as they show people sitting there partying and pouring alcohol all over their heads.
right.
But I think it is so important to know that there are rules and regulations, even with a legal substance,
Sure.
as far as medical cannabis is concerned, that you can get yourself in trouble if you don't follow the rules. I know of somebody who went out and they bought a whole bunch of Ace, and they just combined it all into one big bag and put it in the glove compartment and started driving, was pulled over for I don't know what, and they saw a bag in their glove compartment with more than 20 grams, which they just bought legally, but those guys were in big trouble.
But I think the other side of it too, Gary, is I understand that, but I think also, I know everybody loves to hear about edibles, and we all like candies, but you got to be very careful of edibles. I mean, just about the time you think it's not working is the time it starts working. By the time you think it's not working, and you take that second one, and so just how to consume it, I think, is really important. I do one on a webinar on routes of administration. I'm not doing them this quarter because I've had too many new topics come in, like cancer and neuropathy. But that's a really important show. I mean, when you hear people, when I explain to people that when you you light that joint, you're burning off all the terpenes, which is what is the medical value, the cannabinoids and all the flavonoids. They were like, really? But it works. Well, yeah, because that little bit still has. That's how effective cannabis is. That's a positive. But imagine if you could get the truth. Imagine if you use a concentrate, for example, all right, and you could get the same smoke, the same thing, but you get all the terpenes and the flavonoids that are in there. But huge difference. And I've had people convert over or go to a different regime, and it's been night and day with respect to how cannabis works.
Now, from what you're saying, I should not be lighting my pre-rolls on a gas stove. Is that correct?
The government will probably have fun with you on that. But no, I mean, it's really interesting. And I had one friend of mine who had a heart replacement, and I was talking to him, and he was explaining to me how he was smoking cannabis, and I said, I think that's great, but are you adjusting your heart medication? And he went, what? And it was like, well, yeah, because that could cause a problem. And we went and talked to his doctor. We got it adjusted, but the point was he just didn't know, and that goes. And neither does the doctors know. When I went in and saw my new doctor, because my old one retired, or he retired, and we were talking about it, and I mentioned the endocannabinoid system, and he looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" And yet we studied this nervous system for how many years? Everybody grew up knowing about the nervous system. We know that if we pick our finger, it hurts and it comes and tells our brain, hey, you got a problem, right? Houston, we have a problem. You know what we never did? And you know what these brilliant folks did from Western medicine? We never studied why, when we said, Houston, we have a problem, what did Houston do about it? They didn't figure that out. What the brain did was it handed it to the endocannabinoid system and said, produce some endocannabinoids, send them to that part of the body, and let's go fix it. That's how the study healed itself. And it wasn't until Mershon got involved that doctors really understood that. Yep. And yet now they're understanding that not only does it take CBD, for example, not only does it affect the CB1 and CB2 receptors, it also, there's a gang of other receptors, the ones that control your blood pressure, the one that controls whether you're diabetic or not, the one that controls pain, the one that controls inflammation. We know all those receptors are affected by the CBD receptors, not just CB1 and CB2, but all of those receptors. And they're going, this is a super vitamin. That's what they're finding out. And that's only come out of the research only the last couple of years. So, I just find it very interesting that the medical benefits are there. Question I have is, how do I shout it to the world to let people know? And it's not a matter of it's just for me. I think if people know, it's going to save hundreds, if not thousands, if not potentially millions of lives. If Nixon would have made the right decision with the Schaefer report, think about how many millions of people would be alive today because of that.
Well, Mark, I want to just take a second to explain the science for folks, who may not quite understand it. But the fact is that in every cell in the human body, right, there's certain structures that regulate factors of cell death. Mm-hmm. And so one of them is endogenous ceramide. And so if ceramide is high, that means that cell death is imminent. If ceramide is low, that means the cell is strong vitality. So simply put, THC connects to the CB1 or CB2 receptors on a cancer cell, for example. And what it does is it causes an increase in ceramide synthesis, which is going to drive the cell death. But a normal healthy cell doesn't produce ceramide in the presence of THC, and therefore is not effective. Right. So understanding that when you see these cancer patients getting better, it's because the THC, especially Carlos, you mentioned, it needs to be in high doses so it can hurry up and drive the cell death of the cancer cells before they replicate and make more cancer cells. And that's how it is in a nutshell. What drives me crazy is the fact that this is known. This is patented by the government, and yet, the government officials are saying we need more research. We need more research, and it's like, no, you don't need more research. You need to get this out to the American public. You need to let them utilize it. Now, here's the other thing: the recent pushback on legalization has been cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. Oh my God, people are going to the hospital because they won't stop vomiting because they're too high. And there's a reason for that. Very simply put, is that our food supply in this country is poison. Right. And the one thing that cannabis will do in high doses is, as you said, will regulate the immune system. So if you ingest poison and then you take high dose of RSO, your body is telling itself with the THC in there, hey, you've been poisoned. You need to get this poison up out of you, which is why the highest instance of cannabis hospitalizations for hyperemesis syndrome tend to be teenagers and people in their early 20s. Because think about the diet that we all had as teenagers in this country. Carlos, how many 2 for $3 McChickens did we eat when we were teenagers?
Hey, listen. When I grew up, now I'm a senior citizen. When I grew up, every kid I know had a PB&J sandwich, a peanut butter and jelly. I never heard about this peanut allergy probably until about 25 years ago. Okay. I never had it. But then again, then we found out that Monsanto changed the formula for the seeds. Then we found out that they came up with wheat that introduced a very toxic agent, which is what's interesting is why people say, I want to be vegan. Well, the wheat I was eating when I grew up is not the wheat that they're producing today. And that's the problem. We cannot have chemically engineered products being able to be put into our diet, and they now that the government doesn't even won't even label it and let them tell you. Okay, so that's because
George Washington Carver was not responsible for all those deaths during the Civil War. That's good to know.
But I do believe people are looking for solutions that help them. It goes back to what's in it for me, and I don't care whether it's pain, whether it's nagging pain, whether it's arthritis, whether it's depression. PTS is a prime example. You know, everybody says we need to study PTS. You really do with cannabis? Why don't you go out and talk to those soldiers who came back, starting with the Vietnam War, and have used it and had a positive experience? Why do we need to have a research? Why don't we do what like the University of California did? Bring a bunch of them in, have them tell their story and document it. Hence why I'm trying to do I Got My Life Back. If we document, let me give you an example. We document 20,000 cases of PTS. It's going to be pretty tough for the government to say it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I don't know any study. Now, the other thing I find fascinating is when I went back and I got involved in this industry, and I see these articles that say, oh, there's been a study that shows the cannabis doesn't work for pain. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, they only allowed cannabis to be studied if you smoked it. AKA, you put the you lit the blunt and you got rid of the cannabinoids, the flavonoids, and the terpenes. Well, hell yeah, you're going to come to that discussion. And that was the only way. The early studies, there were studies from 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The only way they studied it was lighting up a joint. Now that they go in and they're able to use concentrates, they're able to use tinctures that are done correctly, they're able to use whole plant products. Now they're beginning to find out, wow, it really is effective. Yeah, it does work.
And also, before that fact, they were doing historical studies, which basically means they felt it was unethical to give somebody, except for possibly prisoners, cannabis to see what would it do to them.
Right.
And what they had to do is they had to go back and they had to look for people who were already using it and see what conditions they had. And they actually used a study like that in the 1950s where they had, like, I think it was 14 men who were in an asylum for the criminally insane. And they picked 14 of them who happened to use cannabis, and they'd say, aha, there is a total fact right there that obviously using cannabis will put you in a criminally insane asylum.
Yeah, listen, I grew up as I'm a computer scientist, and I went to work with Hewlett Packard, and through a fluke, I ended up in marketing. And I remember when I was going through my marketing training, one of the things they talked about was doing surveys. And I said, why is that? And they said, because you can ask the question in such a way you program the answers. Hence is exactly what the studies are. I learned a lot of these studies were set up exactly the same way. So my point is, let's go back to the science. I was in an auto accident. I have 780 discs in my neck. I have 2 in my back. And after that auto accident, my range of motion was about that right there. I mean, I could not move. And I don't know if you ever had herniated discs in your neck, but they hurt like hell. And when your doctor walks in and says, you're my PB, you're my personal best. I've seen 6, but I've never seen 7 herniated discs. That's not what you want to hear. They give me a bunch of pills. I mean, to the point where I came home and took them and I couldn't even sit on the couch. It was like ridiculous. Now, I obviously went to the medical marijuana folks that I was working with, got a card, got on medical cannabis. And literally the first day when I grabbed a vape pen and I took a hit, the pain went away within 3 minutes. I didn't need a government study. I don't need anybody out there. All I know is that every morning to this day, when I wake up, I have a vape pen on my desk, on my counter. The first thing I do is I take 1 or 2 hits, because sometimes I'll wake up with a level of pain of 7 or an 8. And literally within a minute or two, that pain level's down to a 1. And it's scary how well it works. I mean, the first time it happened, I went to my wife like, whoa, what's going on here? But I can keep myself at a level of pain of a 1 or 2. Now I have a full range of motion. Now I'm able to do some. I've augmented it with some health things. I'm big into Tai Chi, for example. I'm finishing off my part 3, and that's actually helped me. So putting it all together has basically helped me get my life back, meaning that I can just walk down the street and I'm not in pain anymore, which is important. I don't need a medical study to tell me that. Let's put it that way. But I do think that there's enough people out there that I listen to, and I listen to veterans who basically are able to now hold a job because they're using cannabis, where when they're on the opioids, they weren't. Just that factor alone is something that I think from a moral compass standpoint, our politicians should pay attention to that.
They're still into, just go ahead and take some glucosamine and you'll be fine.
So, Mark, I really appreciate you. It's been great. But we're running towards the end of the show.
Sure.
Just wanted you to take a moment, look in the camera, tell people who you are, how they can get a hold of you, how they can support you.
My name is Marc Matoza. I have a couple of websites that are out there. One of them is Marijuana Aware, which you'll see on the screen. This is cannabis education. And what we're doing is we're actually helping cannabis patients who have lifestyle altering conditions understand that can cannabis help or answer that question. Is it safe? And also, what types of cannabis should I use? What terpenes and strains should I look for to use it? Because what I don't want to do is have people say, I tried cannabis, it didn't work, because they bought the wrong product. And I'm sure the dispensaries don't want that, and I don't want that. But we're here to be able to help you get your life back, and that's really what we do, and that's what I do.
Okay.
And what's fascinating is I got a couple of companies over here that gave me some awards, from the Lady Lake Award, as well as GHP in England has given me that's Global Health and Pharma, has basically said I have the best cannabis education pro platform here in the United States, and also the most innovative, which I'm very thank you very much. I don't care about the awards. I care about helping patients like you be able to get your life back, and that's
I care about the awards, and they're pretty impressive.
so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Carlos, I've actually had the opportunity to co-pilot some of these seminars with Mark, and I can say the amount of information that is in one of his webinars is just absolutely amazing. But the way that he presents it gives folks, the average person, the ability to understand the information, comprehend it, and really take control of their lives. And that's one of the reasons why he's got, I Got My Life Back, as well as these other webinars and websites folks can take a look at. But definitely, take a look at the schedule. It's available on our website at suncoastnormal.org. So if you ever want to know what's up on the medical marijuana and wellness series, you can check out our website as well, and it'll take you right over to his to register.
And the other thing is that if you see that schedule, if you go to the follow-up tab on the website, it's all the seminars we ever gave is there. So there are you just pick a topic. Like, for example, a lot of people went to neuropathy, which we hadn't done for 2 years. And you can find those seminars that are out there. And if you do attend one of our webinars, we literally will send out an email that has a copy link of the video to YouTube, has a copy of the presentation, has any notes that are out there, what strains you'll be able to use, and where you can find the products to help you. So as a follow-up, you get a Bible of information to be able to help you quite a bit.
Yeah, and Mark, I just got to say, man, it's your series that helped inspire me to want to, increase our cannabis education to the community. Mm-hmm. So on January 25th in St. Petersburg, Suncoast Normal, in conjunction with St. Pete College and the Pinellas County Library, is hosting a health benefits of medical marijuana seminar, which I will personally be teaching at 6:30 over at the West Community Library at the SBC Gibbs campus. And folks can learn about the benefits of medical marijuana for the treatment of chronic debilitating conditions, which we have a few of them listed up there on the flyer. But definitely join us. This is in person and it's free. That's one of the biggest things, Mark, that really struck me about your program, is that it's free for people to join and get access to. And so I think it's important that we provide this information for the community and for patients who really need it.
Sure. And that's what it's all about. A number of dispensaries have been fortunate enough to sponsor me, which is great. But I think also what we really want to do is we want to be able to get this out and make it available to the public. And Chris, I would really like to open up a discussion of being able to have these webinars be broadcast, not just in Suncoast Normal, but you talk about Maryland, talking about your OL chapters. I'd like to have every Normal chapter let people know this education exists and make sure I'll follow whatever standards you need to have. I'm sure you have standards for education, and I think I follow them. But I'd like to be able to get that message out as well, if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to working with you on making that a reality.
Right. Because I think the more people know, if you know something's going to happen, you can relax and it's there. Like I did with my mom. Once I told her what was going on, she was fine. If you don't know, that's the scary part. And, that's a natural reaction.
Yeah. Well,
Carlos, I'm still going to hold the politicians.
Yeah, and on that note, Mark, if you're listening in today, if you're inspired by the great work that Mark is doing in the education, and you hear about these politicians and you really want to take it to them, we're having our next membership meeting virtually January 26th. You can go on our website, suncoastnormal.org, and you can RSVP. It's going to be over Zoom, so just go ahead and register. Download Zoom so you can get access and participate in the meeting. But at this meeting, we're actually going to talk about our upcoming lobby days.
Right.
So we have lobby days February 21st through the 23rd in Tallahassee, in conjunction with Tallahassee Normal. So shout out to Tallahassee Normal for helping us get this organized. If you're someone who really wants to see these bills passed, this is your last opportunity before they go into the general session. It's one of the last committee weeks on the books. So, most of the work that actually gets done doesn't get done during the session. It gets done ahead of time. So if you're a member of the public, if you're a member of Normal and you want to make this happen, join us for lobby days in Tallahassee.
And I just posted both of those links in
Great.
all the chats and all the social media platforms that we're being broadcasted on.
That's right. We're currently broadcasting live on Facebook. We're on Periscope, on Twitter. We're on Twitch, and we're on YouTube. And so I want to give a shout out if you're watching us on YouTube, or go to our YouTube channel. Carlos, if you could flash the link, it's youtube.com/@Suncoast Normal. Give us a like, give us a follow. We want to make the rotation bigger and better. 2023 is a year where we have a lot of amazing guests in store for you. We're already kicking it off to a great start. Last week with Dr. Ethan Nadelman, this week with Marc Matoza. So we have some amazing cannabis educators, researchers, activists joining us throughout this year. And we have a very special event coming up to kick off the beginning of the summer. We'll be launching and hosting in Tampa a Cannabis Awards. And so, Mark, I hope that you can come to the Cannabis Action Awards, because if I'm not mistaken, you're actually a nominee for one of them. So we're happy to tell you here live.
Well, thank you very much. I love whatever you do. I try to attend as much as possible. If I'm in town, then we're doing that. I have, as you know, I have a couple of projects going, so I will be more than happy if I'm available. I will be there. No question.
Yep, it's going to be a Memorial Day weekend, so
I'll be available. Yeah.
And I got a question for Mr. Gary Stein here.
What was that?
How else can you get involved with Normal?
Funny you should ask that, Bob. You can go to suncoastnormal.org and you can become a member. And being a member at Suncoast Normal means that you are an extraordinary person and you are not a bureaucrat, unlike Mr. Kino over there, who is obviously a wannabe bureaucrat. That's just the way he looks. It's just that vibe I get from him. But you can actually become an advocate to go ahead and make the change that you want to have changed, because there are so many things that are wrong with this program right now, and we aim to fix them. And we need your aim too. And we want your body, we want your voice, and we want you to become part of the solution. And not only do you get for $25 now, the magnanimous amount of membership, but you get this fantastic gold pin, which really freaks people out over at the Publix when you're trying to check out. And also you get a card, so you are a card carrying member of Normal, and a discount. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
And you get a discount at Chillum CBD and somewhat mushroom dispensary at 1714 North 7th Street East, or was it East 17th Street in Ivor.
Gary, one of the things is I run into a lot of people that will complain about things. They'll say, I don't like this, I don't like that. And I get it.
People have said that the villages complain about things. It's incredible.
Yeah. My question is, what are you doing about it? Are you taking the action to solve the problem? Are you bringing it up just candidly to get attention? Or are you really, really bringing it up as a problem that you want to solve? If it really is a problem you want to solve, join Suncoast Norval to help solve that problem. If you want to talk about it, then keep talking about it. But I think at this point in time, the people of this country need to have the politicians understand they work for us. I don't care what platform, what party, our system, they're trying to, the politicians have tried to, whether it's Tallahassee or it's DC, are trying to make it so we work for them. And I think we need to be able to, candidly, the people need to be able to get take over the control of government again.
Well, they want to be compliant to their constituents, but they have no idea what their constituents actually want. So being a constituent, tell your politicians what you want and educate them. Gary,
I'll tell you something on that. Many years ago, I helped introduce something called whitehouse.gov. I worked with Al Gore, and he and I was with Netscape Communications at the time, and we brought up whitehouse.gov.
Netscape, there's a voice from the past.
It was actually delayed for 2 months by the Kennedys. Okay. And it wasn't the Kennedys themselves, it was the politicians, because in the past, the way the government worked in Washington, D.C. was you'd bring up a bill, the politician would say, my constituents want this. They would basically within 3 weeks pass or fail the bill and then move on. And the reason for that was because people would write letters, send letters in, maybe take a week to write a letter, but in 3 weeks they knew exactly what their constituents wanted. Okay. And so what happened was they whatever position they took could have been wrong. They didn't have to worry about it. When we put White House Gov on, people can sit back, what they call the Gray Panthers. Senior citizens can say, hey, my local senator, here's what I really think. And he knew within an hour of what's going on. The politicians did not want that because it broke that system of them doing what they wanted to do. It's taken them some years to try to go back to that. But I think it's time that we're able to say, and I think what I liked about our last election was the people really made it very clear that there were certain parties in certain positions that they didn't want. And I'm not getting political. It was very clear. Now, our politicians still aren't listening. You can see by the votes they made in the House. But it's pretty clear these people want to go back. And a lot of church-going people want to be able to have a moral compass back in our government. And I think that's what's important. And that's what we're missing. So,
yeah, especially with the hypocrisy of it, Mark, because you have some of the most fervent folks who will weaponize scripture in the Bible into certain public policies to target people and attack people, and that's not what is supposed to be meant behind it, right? So, we want the same politicians that are espousing to have a moral compass are the same ones that are Venmoing their buddies for underage girls to have sex with, and that's just ludicrous.
Yeah, or you find them being arrested for a lot of things. Yeah, it's really crazy. I mean,
that's kind of a panhandle thing, I think.
Panhandle thing. No, I think there's a little bit of that in DC. I think you have a little bit of that. No, and I'm not against politicians. All I do is I want to have them do their job. And if you get elected, I want them to do our job. We have a Republican representative for the House in my particular area who does not represent my thinking and the thinking of my community, and constantly keeps trying to tell me what to think. And I'm sorry, I am who I'm going to be now, and I'm going to stand up to you. And there's some people who don't. But bottom line is, it goes back to Suncoast Normal. Why join you? Because this is a voice, and these folks need to hear it, and they need to hear it not just from groups like Suncoast, because they know you're coming, and they know you got this built-in prejudice. But if they hear it from the general public, that says we are the general public. I'm not associated with Normal. I'm Mark, and I think that we need to seriously look at cancer research, and we need to make sure the cannabis is included in it. Because here's the studies that are in the NIH. Here's the studies that Christina Sanchez has done. Here's the studies that have been done in Israel. Here's the studies that are being done by the University of McGill in Canada. Why are we lagging? Right?
Now,
If this was a war, we'd have more munitions in that war than we could shake a stick at. But this is a war for what? Our health and our life? Whoa. We'll go kill people, but we won't try to keep them alive.
Now, we're talking about Daniel Webster. We're talking about Anthony Sabatini, because both of them are uneducatable.
Yeah.
But
the question is, do they want to be educated? See, that goes back to the other thing, Gary. I think we need to have a little button that says, do you really, in fact, want to be educated? Because look, I don't think there's anybody who's a normal human being that can't look at this and say, here's the conclusion, it should be legalized. I think if you don't want to listen, then you can come to that conclusion. And the reasons for not listening, I understand, are personal gain. There's a number of other reasons. But I don't think that I'm amazed how many people, especially seniors, come to me and say, you know what, why is this not generally known? Why isn't it no more? And it's because you went through 60 years of misinformation. And we tend to want to follow misinformation these days. And that's the cycle we got to break. Every one of my slides, if you look at them, at the bottom has a link to the medical study that information came from. Okay, this isn't like a little pothead sitting in the corner trying to do something. This is a guy who look, I'm going to tell you, here's what it is, and you can trust the science and the facts that's out there. That's what we need more of in this particular industry.
And with that, we close church today by ending our sermon and telling you guys to go ahead, do about 125 Ave Marias, because you need it after this show.
Hi, everybody.